How could you remember how to write the characters describing Japanese when you forgot how to write the characters for Chinese? Huh? Put your hand out. Do you still want to write this? Do you? I'm telling you, you're Chinese. You need to remember that. Got it?
This is a Chinese teacher educating primary school students. When a student was drawing and wrote, "I love Japanese people," the teacher used a ruler to hit the student's hand.
If you make any other mistake, I can forgive you, but definitely not this one. Tear it up now. Rip it apart. Anyone who dares to write something like that again, I'll send you home immediately.
This incident reflects China's anti-Japan education. Under CCP propaganda, Chinese people are filled with hatred towards the Japanese. This deep-rooted hatred makes Japanese people in China feel concerned about their safety. The latest reports show a decline in the number of Japanese students in China for the first time in 5 years. According to a June 16 report by Asahi Shimbun, data from the Japanese Overseas Children's Education Promotion Foundation show that the number of Japanese students in 11 schools across China, including Beijing and Shanghai, will drop to 3,226 by 2025, down 382 students, or 10.6%, from 3,608 the previous year. This marks the first decline in student numbers since the outbreak of COVID-19. Before the pandemic, the number of Japanese children attending school in China consistently exceeded 4,000. However, in 2020, it dropped dramatically to 2,888 due to the pandemic. Since then, numbers have shown signs of recovery, reaching 3,608 in 2024. But the latest data shows a downward trend for 2025, with student numbers decreasing across the board. The largest drop occurred in Hangzhou, where student numbers fell from 61 the previous year to 41. Currently, cities in China with Japanese schools include Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Tianjin, Dalian, Qingdao, Wuhan, Chongqing, and Hangzhou. Asahi Shimbun analysis points out that in addition to adjustments in corporate assignment policies, a series of recent incidents concerning public order have also contributed to the decline in the number of Japanese students in China. On June 24, 2024, a man attacked a Japanese school bus in Suzhou, Jiangsu province, resulting in 3 casualties, including a Japanese national. On September 18, 2024, a 10-year-old boy was stabbed to death while on his way to school in Shenzhen, Guangdong province. These incidents have gained widespread attention in Japanese media and on social media, heightening concerns among Japanese expatriates in China about the safety of their children. A tea house operator in Shenzhen named Liu told English media that the decline in the number of Japanese students in China is largely due to concerns over the safety of their children. He said that the stabbing incidents involving Japanese nationals and children have made parents worried about their children facing similar risk while studying in China, prompting them to send their children back to Japan. What is particularly concerning is that after the stabbing incident, the CCP authorities neither disclosed the truth about the case nor took clear actions to limit anti-Japan or hate speech. The CCP's Ministry of Foreign Affairs called such incidents isolated events. This response has caused disappointment. Japan's major media outlets, despite having differing views and stances, have been unified in their criticism of the CCP, especially regarding the incident involving the Japanese schoolchild in Shenzhen. Japan's largest newspaper, the Yomiuri Shimbun, published an editorial on September 26, 2024, discussing the death of a Japanese child in China. The editorial stated, "Japanese children lost their lives in China, and not only did the CCP refuse to provide the truth of the incident, but it also instructed Japan on how to respond. This is absolutely outrageous. There is no bottom line." Japanese media outlets such as NHK have reported that although no information about Japanese schools was found on Weibo, videos about demolishing Japanese schools remain, and numerous speculative videos about Japanese schools can still be seen. At the time, Japan's Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in New York and called on China to disclose the truth about the incident and to remove inflammatory posts on Chinese social media that exacerbated tensions between the two countries. However, Wang Yi only referred to the incident as an isolated occurrence and urged Japan to remain calm and avoid politicizing and exaggerating the situation. The Yomiuri Shimbun editorial highlighted that China's repeated claims that the incident was not targeted at the Japanese people are unacceptable. It argued that by saying this, China is downplaying the situation and suggesting it shouldn't be taken seriously. The newspaper also pointed out that it's illogical for the perpetrator to ask the victim to remain calm. Even nearly a year after the incident, Japan's ambassador to China, Kenji Kanasugi, visited Fuzhou on June 12 and met with the CCP's provincial secretary of Fujian, Zhou Zhuyi, calling for the safety of Japanese nationals in China to be ensured. Earlier, Kanasugi had given a speech at Renmin University of China in Beijing, stating that the most difficult issue in Japan-China relation was the emotional divide between the people of the two countries. He added that Japan still holds some negative views towards China, and Chinese society also has negative impressions of Japan, which cannot be easily resolved overnight. According to Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the number of Japanese nationals in China dropped below 100,000 in October 2024, a decline of more than 50,000 compared to the peak in 2012. In fact, 2024 saw not only the killings of Japanese nationals in China, but also an attack on an American teacher. The CCP's cold response to both incidents has raised questions about China's ability and attitude in handling crises. As mentioned earlier, the decline in the number of Japanese students in China is also observed in other countries, including the United States. Recently, the Washington Post reported that amidst unprecedented tensions between the US and China, the number of US students in China has fallen to fewer than 900. Since the 1990s, the number of American students studying in China gradually increased, peaking at 15,000 in 2011. But due to visa restrictions and lockdown measures during the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of American students in China dropped sharply to just 211. After the Chinese government ended its strict zero-COVID policy at the end of 2022, the return of American students to China has still been slow. At the time, U.S. Ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns, stated that by the end of 2023, the number of American students in China was around 700. In a 2024 speech, Burns mentioned that the number of American students studying in China at the time was approximately 800. For instance, Wu Xingbo, a well-known Chinese international relations scholar who taught China's foreign policy at Fudan University for over 10 years, usually had about a third of his students from the US before the pandemic. However, after the outbreak, most international students could not enter China. When Fudan University resumed normal classes in 2023 after the end of zero-COVID policy, none of the 30 students in Wu's class were from the US. According to the Institute of International Education, at the last full academic year before the COVID-19 pandemic, over 11,000 American students were studying in China. At that time, China was the seventh most popular non-European destination for American students. However, by June 2023, China had fallen out of the top 20 destinations. Even after the peak of the pandemic, the number of American students in China continues to decline. The Wall Street Journal reports that the primary reason for this are increased personal safety risk under CCP rule and a sluggish Chinese economy, which discourage American students from studying in China. In July 2023, after China enacted the anti-espionage law targeting foreigners, the U.S. State Department issued a Level 3 travel advice advising Americans to reconsider traveling to mainland China and Hong Kong due to arbitrary enforcement issues, including exit bans and risk of wrongful detention. In February 2024, China revised its law on guarding state secrets, which came into effect on May 1st. The new law expanded the scope of classified information to include work secrets, placing restrictions on the overseas travel or employment of personnel handling sensitive information. On April 12, the U.S. State Department updated its travel warnings for mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau, maintaining the Level 3 risk warning for mainland China and Macau due to the increased use of exit bans against bankers and executives. A U.S. State Department spokesperson said that the U.S. is committed to expanding people-to-people exchanges, but Chinese authorities have not consistently supported efforts to strengthen ties between the two nations' people. Reports suggest that many American students interested in China studies or the Mandarin language have chosen to study in Taiwan instead due to the tense U.S.-China relations. Regarding the decrease in the numbers of American students in China. Associate Professor Li Menjiang at the Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, told the United Morning Post that this is a result of the deterioration of US-China relations in recent years. Professor Zhang Jiadong at Fudan University American Studies Center pointed out that cultural exchanges have diminished, with even signs of a decoupling trend. While the deterioration of US-China relations play a role, the core issue lies in China's domestic policies, which make many students uncertain about studying in China. A Pew Research Center poll released on April 17, 2024 shows that about 77% of Americans hold a negative view on China. 42% believe the CCP poses the greatest threat to the US, while 33% regarded it as America's greatest enemy. This public sentiment is reflected in the worsening decoupling between the US and China. After the tariff war began, US allies joined the trend of decoupling from China. It is expected that the likelihood of American students studying in China will continue to decrease. Along with a decline in the number of American and Japanese students in China, South Korean students' enrollment in China has also dropped significantly. According to a Chinese state media article, there were about 14,500 South Korean students in China in 2024, only about one-fifth of the peak number. On January 19, 2024, South Korea's Ministry of Education reported that the number of South Korean students studying in the US reached 43,847, making up 34.5% of the total, a 7.6% increase from the previous year. The second largest group of South Korean students was in Japan, with 15,930 students, up 16.3% from the previous year. But the number of South Korean students in China dropped to 14,500, marking an 8.5% decrease. China used to be a more popular destination for South Korean students than the US. In 2017, there were 73,240 South Korean students in China, surpassing the US 61,007 students, and Japan 15,457 students, making China the most popular destination. The number of South Korean students in China sharply dropped to 16,968 in 2022 due to the pandemic, while the number of South Korean students in the US and Japan also decreased. They very quickly began to recover, but the number of South Korean students in China continued to decline. Voice of America reports that COVID-19 was the main cause of the drastic reduction in South Korean students in China. Another reason was the growing anti-China sentiment among the South Korean public, particularly among younger people. A survey conducted by a South Korean civic group found that 91% of respondents aged 20 to 39 held an unfavorable view of China, a higher percentage than for North Korea. A 2022 Pew Research Center poll also revealed that 80% of South Korean respondents viewed China negatively. The increase in the number of students from these countries studying in China is part of a broader trend of foreigners leaving China, linked to the economic decoupling and the withdrawal of foreign investment. Asahi Shimbun points out that Japanese companies in China are undergoing a major adjustment in their overall operations. In addition to rising labor costs and increased geopolitical risk, more companies are now opting for local hiring to reduce long-term assignments of Japanese employees and instead employ local Chinese talent. Mr. Ling, a former manager of a Japanese company in China who is familiar with operations of Japanese businesses, told overseas media that the three largest foreign investors in China are the US, South Korea, and Japan. The decline in the number of Japanese students in Chinese schools reflect not only a reassessment by families regarding safety and education, but also indicates a shift in Japanese companies' confidence in the Chinese market. Another economist and former Xi'an Jiaotong University professor Huang Ping believes that as industrial chains shift overseas, foreign companies, including Japanese firms, are forced to seek new investment environments in countries like Vietnam and India. He stated that in the past, Japanese companies were a significant part of China's manufacturing sector, but now some companies have moved factories to Southeast Asia, not only for economic reasons, but also due to long-term assessments of China's systems and stability. Huang Ping further emphasized that the departure of Japanese companies will affect the confidence of other foreign companies in China, creating a ripple effect that could accelerate the speed of foreign capital withdrawal. Some respondents believe that the trend of foreign capital leaving China has already reached an irreversible stage. In addition, the number of foreign tourists in China has also sharply decreased. In the first quarter of 2025, the total number of foreign visitors entering China was 9.2 million. In 2024, the number of foreign arrivals and departures reached 64.9 million, which is only about two-thirds of the 2019 level. In 2018, the number of foreign entries and exits to China exceeds 90 million for the first time, reaching 95.3 million. This number rose to 97.7 million in 2019. Since then, the number of foreign entries into China has not recovered. Mr. Zhang, a Chinese Canadian who returned to China for business in 2023, shared his experience with overseas media. Upon returning, he flew from Qingdao Jiaodong International Airport to South Korea, Japan, and then back to Canada. He observed that there were noticeably more foreign tourists in South Korea and Japan, especially from Europe and the US compared to China. He compared his travels in China and noted that in late January 2023, he couldn't see many foreigners on the Bund in Shanghai or on Nanjing Road. In Beijing, the change was even more noticeable, with hardly any foreigners seen around Qianmen. Mr. Zhang believes that China has truly regressed. He argued that policies such as visa-free 10-day visits or 144-hour visa exemptions are mere quick fixes that fail to attract foreigners. The inability to access foreign websites and the difficulties with payments, such as not being able to get change even when paying with cash at milk tea shops, restaurants, and taxis, are major barriers for foreigners. Regarding the reasons for the decline in foreign visitors, some commenters shares, there are hardly any foreigners seen in the major cities now. The 3 years of the pandemic scared them all away. There is no internet access when entering, no WeChat Pay, no Google Maps. How can foreigners even get in? But traveling from China to other countries is just as easy as traveling within the country. There are often people checking IDs on the streets of Beijing. Buses going into the city require passengers to show their IDs or get off for a check. And even hotels have separate areas for locals and foreigners. They take fingerprints here, record faces there. Every step you take requires a security check. Who would want to come here? Foreigners have to register at the local police station within 24 hours of entering China. It's just too much hassle, so people don't come here anymore. Professor Xie Tian from the University of South Carolina Aiken told overseas media that China's economy is clearly in a severe recession and may have entered a Great Depression, meaning that the downturn will likely continue for some time, and at least until 2025 or 2026. During an economic downturn, the CCP hostility towards foreigners and foreign businesses become particularly evident. Foreign companies feel discriminated against and must deal with the CCP's harassment and interference related to national security, including establishing CCP branches within their companies. These factors have led to the departure of foreign businesses, and tourist perception of China have also changed. China's international image has worsened due to the CCP's handling of the pandemic and support for Russia, making China less attractive to Western tourists. As for whether China can reopen, many online users openly stated, "It's too late, it's over." Mr. Zhang believes that if China were to actually reopen now, reform politically, and re-engage with the world, it would not be too late. However, he doubts this will happen, as Xi Jinping is unlikely to stop and will continue pushing China backward. Xie Tian believes the real openness comes with political reform. If the CCP rule were dismantled and China become politically open, other areas such as the economy, culture, society, and exchanges will no longer be issues. The key reason China has returned to a more closed, controlled state of political at heart, political openness or reform is not something the CCP would be willing to consider, which makes cultural openness unachievable under the current system. This lack of political freedom is contributing to economic stagnation while also making it harder for China to improve its image abroad. As a result, the number of foreign visitors to China will remain low.